Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar for June, and we're featuring our grant program. So the title of our webinar is NCUA Grants Assist with Strategic Initiatives. I'm going to be your moderator today. My name is Catherine Baxter, and my host today is Ikenna Nwampa. And before I turn the console over to Ikenna, you know the drill. We're going to go through a few housekeeping items. So please turn your attention to your screen. And remember to adjust the volume on your computer so that you can hear this webinar clearly. If you need to resize the slides, you may drag the bottom right corner to do that. And also remember, from this website, you will need to allow pop-ups. There's a feature on your console, the left-hand corner. It's for you to ask us a question. So Ikenna is going to introduce his panel, and what I'd like you to do is to address your question to that particular speaker. We want to make sure you get the accurate answer to any of your questions. Now, you know what we do in approximately 3 weeks? We close caption this webinar for on-demand viewing. I'm getting ready to turn the console over to my host, Ikenna. He's so excited to be here. Ikenna, you have the comm.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, everyone, for being here or being forced to be here. Either way, we have a lot of good news for you about our grant program this year. I have guest speakers with me today, and I have Susan Carter and Shasanga Daka from NCUA, and I have someone in the field from a credit union to give you the credit union's perspective about the grant process. I have Carolyn Lopez out of First Bergen Federal Credit Union. So we're going to go through, give you a program overview for 2018, discuss the grant initiatives that we're offering, give you a brief on the selection process, go through some of the reporting requirements, and then you'll get to hear some good information from Carolyn, and then we'll have a live application demonstration for you to get you familiar with how the application looks and get you familiar with the feel of it. And then to end the webinar session, we'll have some time for you guys to ask questions, and we'll answer as many as we can. Next slide, Catherine. So here is our 2018 grant guideline. I highly encourage everybody to go to ncua.gov right now and download our grant guideline. If you go to the Credit Union, the Office of Credit Union Resources and Expansion webpage and go to our grant site, you will see that available. This document has a lot of the details and specifics about a lot of the items we plan to discuss today. Next slide. So, getting started with our program app overview. But before we have a poll, before we get started with that, we have a poll question for you, and you can answer yes, no, or not applicable. Have you received a CDR-LEF grant in the last 2 years? Meaning between 2016 and 2017, our grant rounds. Have you received the grant? If you haven't, but you've applied, just select no. If you've never applied for our program, you can simply select not applicable.
So, okay, we need to also let our audience know that they can click on one of the radio buttons. Don't reply in the Q&A because we can't track your answers. So just click on the radio button, and that will help us out a lot.
Okay.
Let's see what our results are.
Okay.
Here we go.
So this is a good webinar for the 57% of you guys who have not applied, and also that 17% that hasn't applied or that hasn't received the grant in the past. Let's move on to the next slide. So, Susan, for those of us who are not familiar with the grant program, the CDR-LEF program, could you kind of explain what these grants are for?
Sure, Ikenna. The NCUA CDRLF grant program is a great opportunity for low-income designated credit unions. Grant funding is available to implement or enhance products and services, develop tools that increase the security of member financial information, or develop innovative programs that enhance the financial well-being of underserved members. These grants are reimbursable grants, which means credit unions will incur the cost and then obtain reimbursement of eligible expenses.
Okay, thanks for that overview. Are there any special requirements for this grant program?
Eligibility requirements and criteria have not changed, just like last year. You must be a low-income designated credit union to apply. It doesn't matter if you are a large or small institution, as long as you have the low-income designation, you're good.
And can you tell us?
Oh, I have a couple more requirements.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You also need to have a DUNS number, and you must be registered with SAM.gov. The System for Award Management, SAM.gov, that's an official website of the U.S. government. You need to have an active SAM registration to apply. This registration has to be renewed each year. So don't assume because you registered once that you have an active registration. Make sure you check to see when your registration expires.
And can you also tell us, are there any costs that are associated with these items that you just mentioned before?
That's a great question, and there are no costs associated with these requirements. Once you have the low-income designation, DUNS number, and SAM.gov registration, you can get an account with Cyber Grants. Cyber Grants is the tool we use to manage the grant application and reimbursement process. If you apply for one of our grants, you'll need a login with Cyber Grants, and that's where you will find the grant application.
That's some great information, Susan. So what type of initiatives are we offering this year, and how much is available?
We have 3 grant initiatives in the 2018 grant program. First, the Digital Services and Security Initiative has a maximum award amount of $10,000. The Leadership Development has a maximum award amount of $10,000. And our Underserved Outreach grant has a maximum award amount of $20,000. We received a $2 million appropriation in federal funding, and we expect to award $2 million in grant funding. $2 million in grants this year.
So what about, tell us about some of the limitations. Are credit unions allowed to apply for more than one initiative?
That's a good question, Ikenna. You have to select one initiative. You will be required when you log into Cyber Grants to select one initiative.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that information. Let's go to the next slide and get into the timeline of the grants. When can credit unions begin applying for the grant, Susan?
The grant round opens July 1st at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, and it closes Saturday, August 18th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time.
Okay.
That's a Saturday, and that is a full 7 weeks to get your grant application submitted.
Okay. So that's very friendly for our credit unions that are on the West Coast and may not be able to get their application in time by 5 p.m. Eastern. So they have until 11:59 Eastern, August 18th.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any other important dates for the grant period
Sure.
that they should know about?
Yes. We recommend that you get your SAM.gov registration completed by July 23rd. Let's see. We also recommend getting your application in by August 15th. As you can imagine, we get a lot of questions, especially toward the end of the grant window. So if you have questions, make sure to contact us through our mailbox at cureapps@ncua.gov by August 15th.
Okay. So that's really important for everyone listening. If you want to ask questions about the program, you want to get that in by August 15th. So our staff has enough time to respond to you prior to the deadline, the grant deadline. So let's move to the next slide and begin discussing the grant initiatives and a little bit more details about these grants. Wait, prior to that, let's start with our another posed question. And right now we have, how often are credit unions required to recertify their SAM account? You can answer never. Initial SAM registration remains active forever. Every 2 years or annually. This is a trick question, and we just want to make sure you're engaged and listening.
You gave him a trick question.
Absolutely.
That's not fair. Did we tell them what SAM.gov was?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we discussed SAM. But even if they get it wrong, this is a good opportunity for them to learn the best answer,
All right.
the correct one.
So do you want to go to the next slide to see what everyone said?
Yes, yes.
All right, let's do it. Wait for it. It's coming. Okay, let's see. Let's push to the audience. Let's see if it's coming. There we go.
Oh, that is pretty good. It looked like 82% of the credit unions responded annually, so that is the correct answer. You are required to, if you haven't registered within SAM, you're required to register and have an active account, and annually you need to recertify that. There has been some new policy changes within SAM, so we do encourage credit unions to, register or recertify as soon as possible, just in case that those new changes may impact the time it takes to process your request. So let's move on to the next slide. Finally, what a lot of credit unions probably want to hear about is discuss the initiatives that we have. And we are going to start with digital services and security. I'm going to ask Chisanga if she could tell everybody listening, what's the purpose of this initiative?
Sure, I can. So for this initiative, credit unions will be able to deliver their services electronically, and they'll be able to secure credit union information from cybersecurity threats.
Okay. Now, is there, I see a list of eligible projects. What about the eligibility to apply for this grant? Who's eligible to apply for this one?
So for this initiative, only the credit unions that have a common rating of 3 or better are eligible to apply, and the credit unions that have a common rating of 4 and 5 are not eligible.
Okay.
So can you tell us what kind of projects credit unions can use this grant for?
Sure. So as posted on the screen, we have a slide that shows the eligible projects that we're offering for this initiative. And some of the common projects that credit unions have implemented in the past are mobile banking, online banking, risk assessment, and as mentioned earlier, for this initiative, you can apply for one or more of the projects that are listed in the table.
So just to kind of reiterate, there is no limitation. They can apply for one or more of the digital services and security awards.
That's correct, Susan.
Thank you.
Okay. So if I'm a credit union and I want to implement remote deposit capture in addition to bill pay with this grant, am I allowed to do that?
Yes, I can. You're allowed to do that.
Okay.
You can select one or more of the projects.
Okay. That's good news. Well, I know we have all reviewed and processed a lot of these applications. Chisanga, do you have any good examples of how credit unions have used this grant in the past?
I actually have a good example of one credit union that actually thought that protecting member information was a top priority, and they wanted to secure the information on their mobile devices, so they decided to implement a fingerprint technology, and they had contacted one of their vendors, and the vendor didn't actually have this capability at that time, but they were willing to help the credit union at that point, and they actually implemented this product on their mobile applications, and the credit union was actually able to launch this out to their members.
Okay. That's a pretty good example. So hopefully that gets some ideas rolling for credit unions interested in this initiative.
Right.
How about the application materials? What's required for credit unions, during the application process? What do they need to submit or provide to NCUA?
So this is actually an easy process. Credit unions are not required to submit a narrative for this initiative. The first thing that they'll need to do is select the projects that they plan to do. And then secondly, they'll need to request the grant amount. And please keep in mind that the maximum grant amount for this initiative is $10,000. And lastly, they'll need to provide a description of the expenses that they plan to incur. And it can be any of the listed expenses that we have in our application.
Okay, so no narrative, just select the projects and your amount. That seems pretty straightforward. What's the selection process? How is NCUA going to select the credit unions that receive this award?
Sure. So for this initiative, credit unions will be ranked according to asset size, and the smaller credit unions are going to receive priority for the digital services and security.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Chisanga. So that's it we have for the digital services and security. I'd like to reiterate, for more details about that initiative, please go to the guideline and, read through a lot of the information we have there. So let's move on to leadership development and talk about that. Susan, what's the purpose of this initiative?
Sure. The Leadership Development Grant is about promoting career development, preparing credit unions for success in the event of leadership transitions, and enhancing the knowledge of credit union employees.
Okay. So I'm going to ask the same thing we kind of discussed with Chisanga. What about the eligibility? Like, who's eligible? What type of credit unions are eligible to apply for this grant?
This is just like digital services. Credit unions need to have a CAMEL composite of 3 or better.
Okay.
So can you tell us what type of projects credit unions can apply for this initiative?
Sure. Eligible projects include development of a succession plan, development of a diversity and inclusion plan, diversity and inclusion training. Also, many credit unions use the award to strengthen employee operational, leadership, and industry knowledge through training.
And are credit unions allowed to apply for more than one of the projects for this initiative?
With this initiative, credit unions must select one of the eligible projects.
Okay. So that's a change from the digital services. So the credit unions need to strategically figure out which initiative which project they'd like to implement, and basically provide the information for that.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So how about the application, Susan? What's required in the application?
As with the digital services, the application process is very simple. If you decide on the leadership initiative, you're going to select one of the projects from the pick list in cyber grants. Then you're going to enter the grant award amount requested, subject to the limitation of $10,000. There is a little more required here in that you have to provide a detailed description of the project, including how the funds will be used and how it will benefit members and the community. Finally, you're going to select the expense categories.
Okay, so Susan, I know you've reviewed a lot of leadership development, grant applications, and reimbursement requests. Share with us an example of a good project you've seen for this initiative, you've seen the credit union implement.
Sure. So one credit union used this grant to enroll the CEO, CFO, and department heads into a specialized training course. What was unique about this award is the training also provided follow-up coaching. This enhanced implementing the knowledge the credit union employees gained in the training.
All right, Susan, so can you tell us if there's anything special about how the awardees will be selected for this grant?
Sure. There is an eligibility review. CAMEL 1, 2, or 3 credit unions are eligible. Then minority depository institutions will be ranked from smallest to largest based on asset size. Then remaining credit unions will be ranked from smallest to largest based on asset size. That's how we're going to develop the ranking. In addition, we will review the project objectives to see if they align with the intent of the initiative.
That's some great information, Susan. Now let's talk about the third initiative that we're offering this year, which is the Underserved Outreach. Ikena, can you tell us the purpose of this initiative?
Yeah. So Underserved Outreach, it's an initiative for credit unions that are interested in specific, underserved groups in their communities. And basically, if you want to help improve their economic circumstances of the individuals in that community, there's several studies and cases, that offer insights about the financial condition of, the different underserved populations. So, a lot of low-income credit unions are, they're already doing some of that work to help improve this. So this initiative is basically the NCUA's way of helping those credit unions, basically with a $20,000 grant, and hopefully this grant can kind of, positively impact the lives of those underserved members in low-income households.
Can you tell us how this grant assisted credit unions with strategic initiatives?
Yeah, so this is an initiative that we began last year. It was the first time we offered this initiative, and basically we've seen a lot of really good applications and a lot of good ways that credit unions use the funds. For example, we had a credit union provide microloans to small businesses and disadvantaged minority communities. In addition, we saw a project where a credit union implemented a payday alternative lending program for military veterans. In addition, they offered some financial education and counseling to help those military veterans make better decisions. Another credit union also kind of, I think they partner with some local community organizations to offer workforce development training for at-risk youth and their parents and guardians. And basically, that program kind of was meant to lead, to lead those families towards a path of financial and professional success. So there's multiple uses of these grants, and as you can see on the slide, there's a portfolio of projects that we funded in the past, but that's not limited. This is an initiative where credit unions can really get creative and provide their ideas on helping the underserved and doing outreach.
Okay, now we need some more details. Who's eligible for this grant? Is it the same as the other initiatives?
No, so this is where things change a bit. Let's go to the next slide, and that'll have some highlights. Credit unions that are eligible to apply for this must have a CAMEL composite rating and management rating of 2 or better, meaning both. This is a little switch between the other initiatives, but this is the eligibility for Underserved Outreach.
So what type of projects are under this initiative?
So the projects listed here are broad descriptions of the activities that credit unions can use this grant for. As I mentioned, this is a good opportunity for credit unions that want to be creative and do some type of outreach for these type of projects. So basically, if you want to develop an outreach program, you want to develop a new product or program, develop some partnerships, or provide some small business training or workforce training to individuals that are interested in entrepreneurship. These are the type of projects that the NCUA wants to focus on.
Okay, so let's move on to the selection criteria. So can you explain to the viewers the selection criteria for this initiative and what it's all about?
Yeah, so the review process for this initiative is a little bit different from the others. NCUA reviewers, what we're going to do is use the responses and information provided in the application, and basically that will help us determine the most qualified applicants. We plan to look at 4 different factors that we think are important for this program, which are listed here. Number 1 is importance to the underserved. Number 2 is the business outreach and collaboration strategy. We'll also look at the impact and opportunity and the growth and expansion objectives. A lot more details about what we're looking at here is available in the guideline. And we also have a narrative guide to kind of help the credit union structure their responses in the application in the guideline, and we may be able to take a look at that later in the live demo.
So, Ikenna, it sounds like this has been a very competitive program in the past, and also the application process is very demanding with a lot of application components in play.
Yeah, so this application is certainly more challenging than the other initiatives that we offer, and we request a lot more information from the credit unions. Items such as an executive summary and, the types of underserved populations they plan to serve or target. We also ask for a project budget, a detailed project budget on how they plan to use the fund. So therefore, it's important to kind of use our guideline and help. It's important for the credit unions to use our guideline to help them basically structure their application and make sure we get all the information necessary. Later on, we'll be able to kind of take a look at all of the elements that are required in the application once we go through the live application demo.
All right. Since we have reviewed all the initiatives that we're offering this grant round, Ikenna, can you please share with us the brief summary of the selection process?
Sure. So let's go to the next slide. Here's basically a recap of the selection process. The types of steps in our selection process are very similar for each initiative. However, they vary. They obviously vary as far as the steps that we take during the review. And details about what each step consists of is available in the guideline. But this is just basically a high-level example of how we're going to review the applications for each initiative. So now I'll ask Susan and Chisanga to kind of share some of the post-award activities for our grants to kind of give credit unions an idea of what's required from them if they obtain the grant, and if there's any information that they may need, or that's just certain of the program items that they need to comply with.
Sure, Ikenna. There are a couple of program requirements we do want to point out. Once you receive notification that you have received an award, this will come at the very end of September. Credit unions must formally accept the grant through cyber grants. You'll have approximately 30 days to accept the grant agreement. That's pretty key and very important. Also, periodically, we will be requesting you prepare a project status updates through cyber grants, and notification of a project status update. The deadline will come through email. These are not, complex or comprehensive, but you do want to look out for those emails and follow through on those project status updates. And now, Chisanga has a couple of comments on the reimbursement process.
So the last thing that you need to do is submit the reimbursement application. The reimbursement guideline will be available on our website, and you definitely want to go through the guidelines because this will help you with the reimbursement process. And at the end, when you're done, you have to log into CyberGrants and submit your reimbursement application. We do actually request for a compelling outcome summary because we report this to Congress. And please, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to email cureapps@ncua.gov.
Hey guys, I have a question for you. Susan, you mentioned 30 days to accept the grant. So now what happens if a credit union doesn't do that within the 30 days?
Well, if they don't accept the grant, then they're not awarded the grant. You have to accept the grant. That's part of the process. Do you want to add something, Ikenna?
Yeah, and part of that acceptance, if they could notify us and things change and let us know, hey, we don't want to accept this grant at this time. However, as we mentioned in our selection process, the compliance review for credit unions that do not respond or provide us with a response, that kind of plays into the compliance review as far as looking at, have you complied with our reporting requirements and post-award activities? So that's why these items are really important for credit unions to comply with.
Right. So if you can't accept the grant, you can't use it, still let us know So I guess that's the message there, is to keep in touch with us.
So,
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Is Carolyn up next?
Carolyn, are you ready?
Yes.
So this is a piece of the webinar I think you guys will really enjoy. We have Carolyn Lopez from First Bergen Federal Credit Union. They have received CDRLF grants in the past and have done a lot of good work in their community with the grants. So we thought they were a good example to share some of their stories, share their experience, to kind of give you guys the peer perspective of a fellow credit union. So, Carolyn, tell us a little bit about, just give us an introduction into First Bergen Federal Credit Union, like the demographic information, like what kind of products and services you guys offer.
Yes, absolutely. Well, First Bergen wouldn't be First Bergen if it wasn't for our sponsor, Greater Bergen Community Action. Greater Bergen Community Action empowers low-income singles, couples, and families with programs and services that help their situation to a stronger future. So Greater Bergen Community Action board decision was made to provide financial services to the underserved community, those with poor credit scores, with low incomes, high debt, and other challenges that people have in the community. The best way to achieve this goal was to create a credit union. So the board decided to create this credit union to cater to the group of potential members. So in January 14, 2009, First Bergen received its federal charter from the NCUA, and First Bergen is the first credit union in New Jersey in more than 21 years to receive a federal charter from the NCUA. First Bergen serves in Bergen County and areas served by our sponsor, Greater Bergen Community Action, and just examples of areas like Jersey City and Patterson. Our demographics is, we have a mixture, is a very diverse type of clientele, and it's just a great community-based type of credit union.
That's really, really impressive. Let's go into some of the initiatives that First Bergen is applied for through the CDRLF grants. Like, tell us about some of the initiatives that you guys applied for in the last couple of years, and just discuss how some of those projects, impacted your membership or helped address a serious issue for some of your low-income members.
Absolutely. Our first application was back in 2014. We started with, we needed an intern. So we saw a student who, she was there for us and tried to help us with the job, and we were able to apply for the $4,000 student intern. We then also applied after the following year for the mobile banking and bill paying, because I feel like everything is more digital and we need more digital service. So with that being said, we applied for $7,500, a grant to help us with that, and we received it, and we were very grateful for it. We also received and applied for an application for $7,500 to intern a new graduate. We have a new graduate from marketing, and it's hard as a credit union, especially a small credit union, to have that marketing department. We do it all on our own. So we had someone who can learn the job, become an intern, and help us provide that skill that we were lacking on. Our last grant, I believe, we applied for $15,000. This grant it helped us set up the remote capture for our mobile deposit app, and this is big. This is something that everyone is currently using right now, and also to install our ATMs. Our ATM, everyone needs an ATM, so that was the major project for us.
Okay, so that's a really good example of how NCUA grants kind of, especially the digital services initiative, kind of helped you strategically expand access for your low-income members. The remote deposit capture and mobile banking examples. What about the application process for you guys? How do you guys feel about the application? What was that like, submitting an application? What was the effort for, that your credit union had to put into the applications?
it takes a team. So I'm very proud that our sponsor, again, Greater Bergen Community Action, they have a R&D department who researches and does grants on the natural basis. So we create a committee and we all sit down together and just make sure we tackle every aspect of the application. It is a lot of information, but it helps us grow. It helps us see where our analysis are, what are we reaching, how we are creating these success stories. And it's just amazing how this application alone will really help us to see what are we doing, how is this really working? I think it's great. I don't think that's something that we lack on. I'm very glad of the team that we have to help us with that.
Okay. So let's move to the next slide. So you shared this picture with us. I love local pizza shops because they always have the best pizza.
Don't we all? Yum.
Nobody should debate me. What's the story? Share with us the story behind this pizzeria.
Well, this story behind this pizzeria, this family, the Cabezas family, they were really interested in taking over the pizza shop. They almost lost it due to the fact that the basement had to be renovated and they needed someone to help them answer the phone. Again, you know how it is when it's a family of four or a small family. The dad wants to help succeed in the future. The mom is running around for the school and the children, and then they were all working within the pizzeria. He wasn't getting approved anywhere, and he sat down with me one day, and he heard of me from one of our current members, and they referred him to me. And I said, listen, we're going to help you with this personal loan. Of course, we did some analysis and all that type of stuff, but we were able to grant him with a personal loan to help him stay in business. We renovated the basement with the loan. He renovated the basement, and he also was able to hire a part-time to answer the phone calls while he's out making deliveries. This alone was very big to me because it's in our community. It's in the same strip that we are here at the bank on Main Street, and it was really important to me for someone not to lose their business.
I love these kind of stories because they really show how the NCUA grants have a type of impact in a lot of these communities. And I also just love to see local pizza shops there.
So we know you really like pizza.
I need them for lunch. We all do. We are very grateful to have the NCUA for this, and that's one thing that we're so grateful to have these opportunities to continue building in our communities, because the end of the day is to help each other out.
She hit the nail on the head because that's what credit unions do.
Yep.
That's a wonderful example. Yeah. Wonderful.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I do imagine a lot of credit unions may have questions for you, so stick around for our Q&A session. I imagine they'll love to hear a lot more from you. I guess we're going to go into our next poll question.
I think this is your last poll question, isn't it? Yes, it is.
So our last poll question says, does your credit union have an account with cyber grants? Either yes, no, or not applicable.
So remember, everyone, when you're selecting your answer, use these radio buttons on your screen. Don't send your answer into the Q&A. Just select one of the three selections. If you're not a credit union, of course, and if you're an organization, you would want to hit not applicable. Oh, I'm sorry, this is the third poll question, so we have one more. Okay, so let's move to the answer.
Okay, so that's a good amount. Half of you guys have an account with cyber grants, and 37% do not. So what we'll do is we'll go through a live demonstration of the application system to get you a feel of what's required in the application and how to navigate it. So give us a second here. We are setting up the equipment to share the application.
So you probably can't see IK. He's still here. He hasn't run out. He just had to move to his computer because he's going to give you the live demonstration of cyber grants. It's a real easy platform to use. Wouldn't you guys say, Susan and Chizonga?
I agree with you, Catherine. It's very
easy. Yeah. So you're going to get it here live. Here we go.
So here we go. Let me zoom in a bit. So as we mentioned, this is a very intuitive system. You start here in our login page. If you have an account already, you'll enter your email address and your password. Select login. If you forgot your password, simply you see the forgot your password link. Cyber Grants will send you the information that you need in order to update that. So once you log in, you'll land on our welcome page, and the top section just pretty much gives you an overview of the CDRLF program and some of the important links that are required for the program. We also have the next section, some resource documents for you. The 2018 grant round application guidelines that we discussed right here. If you clicked on these, it'll open right up for you, and you could print the document or save it to your desktop. And we have other documents that are just, resources to help guide you through our program. Here is where you will, the third section is where you would plan to apply for our initiatives. You'll see here, beginning July 1st at 9 a.m., this 2018 grant round application link will be available. It's currently not available, but rest assured that will be available at the beginning of the grant round. The first section that we require is SAM registration. This is the first section that we're going to look at. As Susan talked about, this is a government-wide application system that basically just tracks the way grants are spent and loans are spent for federal programs. Here is where you'll answer whether your credit union has an active status. Once you answer that, you enter your DUNS number. You save and proceed. Give the system a few seconds. It will validate. And if you do not have an active SAM status, it will let you know, and you will need to resolve that prior to proceeding. Here is where we have our contact information. This is particularly important because you want to associate the individuals who are going to be responsible for this grant and be communicating with NCUA here. If you already have contacts, you just want to check the contacts that are associated with the application. And if you need to add someone new, you just simply create a new, and then you'll enter their information. After you do that, you'll save and proceed, and we'll go on to some organization information. We're requesting just basically your tax ID number, your DUNS number, and then your financial institution number. In the event that you do obtain the grant, we use this information to set up the payment for you, and it does need your financial institution information does need to be the credit unions because we do not release funds into a personal individual's account. And as you've seen, if you've already used Cyber Grants and applied for a grant application, that information will be saved, and you won't need to refill those fields. Here is just the guideline. We placed a guideline here for everyone's convenience, so you don't have to navigate back out to the welcome page in case you missed something. And here is the grant application form that's important. We start here just by asking you, what are you going to apply for? Depending on the initiative you plan to apply for, that will trigger the specific elements that are required. As we mentioned, digital services and leadership development don't require much. You just select the projects, you select the expense categories, and we have an optional information box here for you to provide any information that you think would help make your case for the grant, but it's not necessary. and here is the leadership development. As I mentioned, these initiatives are very straightforward and intuitive as far as what's required, and anything that's optional you can see there. Underserved Outreach is where our grants kind of get a bit challenging, in the sense of this is where you'll be required, if you're applying for this grant, you'll be required to provide a lot more information. You see a lot of the general details from each initiative is here, as far as the amount, the title, the beginning and end date. However, this is where we kind of get into the details of what's required and some of those selection criteria. We want you to identify an underserved population. We've selected some that we think are worthwhile population groups to pursue. However, if you have a different group you'd like to include, just simply select other and indicate the name of that group and then add to the list. So here is the section for importance to the underserved. As you can see, this is the narrative guidance as far as the detailed information and bullet points that we'd like you to describe in the application. This is what we will basically review your application on, your ability to respond to these items and describe the situations that your credit union plans to address with the grant. So as I scroll through, I'm just scrolling through the different sections that are required: business strategy, collaboration strategy. This is not necessarily an assessment of whether or not you have a partner for this initiative. We just want to assess how well you coordinate with organizations to kind of improve your grant outreach. If you don't have any partners, just simply put not applicable in these sections. These are other section: impact and opportunity, and growth and expansion objectives. So as I mentioned, it's a very intuitive process as far as what's required and what you need to submit and complete. We have a project budget upload. If you do not complete a certain section, the system will let you know. It'll give you all of these red flags based on what you submitted and what's required. So, and it will also save your application. You won't lose any information in the event you do try to save and proceed without completing everything. The last piece of the application is the terms and conditions. We basically outline kind of the terms and conditions that credit unions need to complete prior. Credit unions need to agree on prior to submitting the application, and then you'll just validate that and certify that you're a credit union representative and that you plan to use the grant according to our terms and conditions. So if we go back to the welcome page, if you start an application and let's say you're not ready to submit and complete it, you want to add some information later, simply go down. There's an area that says applications requiring action. You can continue here, and it'll get you back started in your application and let you know. So that's pretty much it for our application demo, to give you the feel of what we have and how to navigate that and submit your application to us.
All right, let's go to your next poll question. Thank you, IK. Here we go. You got it? Okay. So do you want to tell them about this poll question?
Yeah, so now, how ready and likely is your credit union to apply for a CDRLF grant this year? Are you very likely? Are you certain you're going to submit an application? Somewhat? Are you on the edge? You may not want to complete all of the information, or maybe you're not prepared, you have other priorities, or just not likely. Maybe not right now is not the time for you to submit an application. Just let us know how are you feeling after this webinar, after what you've heard today.
All right, let's give them a few seconds, Patty. And I forgot to mention to everyone, we have our social media guru on Twitter. So if you can, join us on Twitter. If you've got some questions, you can funnel them there. So here's the answer. You guys want to go over this?
That's fantastic. What's that count there for very likely? Is that 65%?
63.
63.
Uh-huh. Oh, actually, it's more than
65.
that. 66.
65. Okay, very good. That's great. Looks like we're going to get a lot of applications and be busy.
Wonderful.
That's great.
All right. Well, I think we're ready for our Q&A, aren't we?
Yep.
All right. We don't have, here's, let's just go straight to the contact page for everyone. There we go. So here's our contact page for our Office of Credit Union Resources and Expansion. If you need the grant area, it's cureapps@ncua.gov. So Carolyn, hang in there with us. We've got a couple of questions, and we're going to get to as many of them as we can before everything is concluded. So I think I'm going to start with probably my most nervous speaker, Chisanga.
No.
Chisanga, here's a question for you. You ready?
Yes, I am.
All righty. So the credit union wants to know on the reimbursement report, how long would it be until they see a reimbursement approximately?
So
It depends. It varies. It depends on sometimes if everything's submitted properly, it typically takes about 2 to 4 weeks to review the reimbursement request, and then the funds will be in the credit union's account. However, there's just all type of different factors that may impact the timing of that disbursement.
Okay. Chisanga, your voice changed all the time. So then, now let's go to IK. And Chisanga, you get to answer the question. Okay, so here we go. We have quite a few questions. And again, audience, we'll get to as many of them as we can. Here's a good question. We got this a couple of times, Akenna. So credit unions want to know, are both state and federally chartered credit unions eligible for these grants?
Correct. Yes, that the grant program is actually just the requirement Susan discussed is the low income designation. So whether you're a state or federally chartered credit union, as long as you have that low income designation, you are eligible to apply.
Okay, wonderful. So now let's go to Susan. Susan. So here's a good question for you, Susan. We got this a couple of times too. Credit union said, can you apply for more than one at a time, more than one grant initiative?
So there are 3 grant initiatives, and you have to select one grant initiative, either Digital Services and Security, Leadership Development, or Underserved Outreach. Now, within Digital Services and Security, you can select multiple grants. You know, you can select multiple projects. We like to call them projects. Under Leadership, you only can select one. And then Underserved Outreach, that's where you get to be creative and make a proposal. Is that anything to add, anyone?
No.
Okay.
Good.
All righty. So now I'm going to ask questions to the panel in general, okay? And you guys can decide who wants to answer the question. So here's a good one. A credit union said, can we use the Digital Services Initiative to build a website for our credit union and develop e-statements for our members?
So for the Digital Services and Security, we have a list of eligible projects that we're offering. And if you don't mind, Catherine, can you pull up the slide for the Digital Services and Security?
Can you tell me which one it is?
That's slide number, what slide was it?
I'm going to have Patty look for that.
Thanks.
For a minute. You have it? You want to push it out there? Okay, it's coming out.
All right, thank you. So we have e-statements that are listed on the table, which is going to be eligible, and we have websites too that is listed as well. And please keep in mind that if your project is not listed on this table, it's not going to be eligible for reimbursement.
I'd like to also add that if you have any question about your project, many people probably have questions, you can always email our mailbox at cureapps@ncua.gov, in advance, and we can get back to you.
Exactly. That's good. And also, Carolyn, you wouldn't mind if some of our credit unions emailed you with any questions either, would you? Oh, you're muted. I think you need to turn your
you guys can reach me at any time. You can send me an email. I'm more than likely to help anyone who needs any help or have any questions or concerns.
Okay. Did you give your email address?
Can I provide it here on the chat? Let me see here.
All right, one more time, Carolyn. Can you give us your email address one more time?
Carolyn, it's spelled differently, so it's CAROLIN LOPEZ at 1ST Bergen BERGEN.com. You can email me at any time, and if you want to just have some type of conversation, you can contact me at 201-968-0202, extension 7072.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right,
You're welcome.
We have a whole lot of questions, but we're running out of time. So I'm going to give one more question to the panel, and we will answer all of your questions once we post this webinar, so don't worry. We'll definitely get to you. So here was a question for the panel. The credit union asked, does the grant affect their ability to apply for a CDFI grant?
That is a really good question. It does not affect their ability to apply for a CDFI grant. I actually believe the Underserved Outreach initiative is a good gateway for credit unions interested in applying for the CDFI program grants. It kind of helps them go through the activity of figuring out a lot of the requirements that the CDFI fund requests in their application, which is, a lot more demanding and because of the fund is a lot bigger. However, there are reporting requirements, federal reporting requirements that do change if you successfully obtain grants from multiple federal agencies. And I believe the limit is if you receive over $250,000 from multiple agencies, you do have to complete a program audit. However, if you don't receive more than $250,000 from NCUA or the CDFI fund or both, you don't need to comply with that.
Okay, great. Well, guess what, everyone? We have run out of time because we promised to let everyone go at 3 o'clock. We do appreciate everyone joining us. Thanks to our panel. Akena was our host. Akena Nwampa was our host. Susan Carter and Chisanga Daka, and Carolyn Lopez is our rock star from First Bergen. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We also thank our back office individual here that runs the show for us, and that is Franz Ayento, our social media guru, Kenzie Snowden, and we also have Patty Hunt behind the scenes with me, and Naya, what's your last name, dear? Johnson is our intern, Naya Johnson. We thank everyone. Thanks for joining us. Hey, join us next month, July 18th. Guess what? Everything you want to know about share insurance, but we're afraid to ask. Part 1, and then we have Part 2. Those aren't the titles, but you're going to love it. We hope to see you. My name is Catherine Baxter. I am signing off for the afternoon. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon and a great week.
Drive safely.